Hello and welcome to another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber from inside the state capitol. I'm your host, Rick Lord, and you know, everyone in West Virginia is very passionate about high school sports. A lot of parents, a lot of students, a lot of athletes around here, and a lot of people have been keeping their eyes on what's going on this session concerning the transfer issue. Over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of parents say something needs to be done. Last year, there was a repeal bill that had some momentum for a while, never got through. This year, maybe more of a compromise in store. And to talk a little bit about that and the state of scholastic sports in West Virginia as a whole is Delegate Dana Ferrell. Thank you so much for your time today, Dana. I know you've kind of been at the forefront of this transfer issue over the last couple of years. Just give me a brief synopsis of where we stand now and the bill that you have here in your hands that you hope to introduce and move forward.
Well, it's great to be here, Rick, and obviously we're well into this again another year. But before we even came in here for this session this year, we had an interim meeting in December and January, and there were athletic directors from around the state came in and talked to the Joint Education Committee, senators and delegates alike here at the Capitol, and they explained some of the problems that we're having already with this transfer rule. And 400 and some transfers first year, and a lot of senators were like apprehensive. Well, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see how this is really going to play out. Well, we had another 400 and some, if not more, transfers again in the fall sports this year. So you're well up over 800. So it hasn't tapered off. We still have the problem. You have haves and have-nots in terms of the different schools in their sports, and so that was the problems they were speaking to us about. And I think at that point there were more consensus, at least from the Senate side, to say, hey, yeah, I think it's time that we step in and try to fix this or tweak it to make it right. So what we've done with the bill last year was a total repeal. We said, let's just get back to where we are, and then we'll work from there.
Now let me take you back the year before that when it first went through. It was tied to the Hope Scholarship.
Yes.
There was some language in there that intertwined the two, and a lot of people are saying that's the only reason it went through, because Republicans didn't want to be on board as doing anything that would be against the Hope Scholarship.
Exactly.
Last year it was a full repeal so that you could just start from scratch. Is there any way to decouple the language there to make sure that it's a standalone bill? Is that kind of what this is?
That is. We're not touching, it was HB 2820, which was allowed Hope Scholarship kids to play athletics if they're private school they were at didn't offer that sport, say football, they could go and play at their local school. That's what that 2820 was. And then the senator that sponsored the original transfer bill attached it on the last hour, the last night of the session, and people we didn't have time to separate it out again. So they basically held their nose, voted yes, and put the bill through because they wanted to get the Hope Scholarship part of it through. Now, what we're doing is just going after the transfer part of it, because that's where the problem's at. And this bill here that we have, and this is but props, and this is you can see we're starting to get the signatures on here. Hopefully I'll have this submitted today or tomorrow back into so it starts in the pipeline in committee here on the House side. But this is a compromise bill. This is a little bit, it doesn't totally repeal. It does allow transfers as it was before, going into your freshman year and going into your sophomore year, because you're still an underclassman. So we feel like, that's still a time you can make some good decisions. But once you're going into your junior year or your senior year, you're an upperclassman now, and that's where we see a lot of this moving around, trying to stack teams or load up or recruiting going. So this gives us a little bit of best of both. We still get that individual choice of parent and student to be able to do that, but we give them a certain amount of time to do it, and then after that, you should have made your decision. Another thing that this bill has that we currently don't have under the current legislation is your ability to be able to transfer back to your home school. As it is now, they can transfer out anytime, anywhere they want, but they can't go back. They're stuck if they get there. And we have heard from from the SSAC that there are a number of kids that want to go back to their home school. Well, that's where we want them if they prefer to do that. So this bill allows them to do that all the way up until they're going into their senior year. And of course, at that point, we figure, okay, there again, we don't want this stacking and loading up of teams. But you've got 3 years to get back to your home school with this bill as well.
Has anybody learned from what's going on in college? Because nowadays you look at college teams and you have kids that are playing 4 different schools in 5 years. You kind of can see the future.
It's crazy.
So is this something to kind of nip that in the bud to make sure that we're not just having these these kids that are put out to market to basically to the highest bidder and jumping from school to school
I
every
think
year?
anybody that's a fan of the game, rather at whatever level, and we know especially at the college level now, I don't think even college sports were never meant to be what we have now. It's looking more like a semi-pro league or professional league. And do we really want that at the Scholastic? Scholastic sports are different from travel ball and club sports. And really, if we look at this transfer thing, it has its roots in travel ball because if you've ever been a parent, been around that, it's always loaded up. Which team can get the most all-stars on their team and go travel to Columbus, wherever, and play in big tournaments. And that's fine for what that is. You want to be seen, maybe get out, where there's exposure to college scouts and things. But scholastic sports were never supposed to be about that. It was about, playing for your school and community, being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And I think, the transfer portal as it is now encourages young people to put themselves ahead of their teammates, their school, and their community. And even though, we can understand individually it makes sense to be able to say, I want to better myself, collectively, we've seen it's been a disaster. So, what we're trying to do is temper this down and get it in a way that hopefully we got a little bit of the best of both worlds. But really big about maintaining Friday night lights, home, school, community, and that, I think that's what the people of this state are about and what they want.
And you're a Sissonville guy, so you come from a smaller community, and you've seen this affect Sissonville teams where some of the best players are getting out and going to another school that has a winning record.
That's a school here, and we've had several of them in the Kanawha Valley that Sissonville's went 0 for 10 last 2 years after going to the playoffs several years before that, and some of their best players went out, and I won't mention other schools, but they moved to other schools where they've made all state teams, right. And so you bring those players back in, probably a significant difference there, and at the same time, Sissonville benefited from basketball. There were some transfers coming to Sissonville basketball last year. They ended up going to the state tournament, lost out there. So, you live by the sword, die by the sword, those kinds of things. But I always say there's really no winners in this because even if you think you're winning, you got transfers coming in. Somebody that's been in that community, went up through, helped their parents work in the concession stand all that time, and the boosters, their kids sit in the bench now because somebody transferred in on top of them.
Now, you mentioned haves and have-nots, and I'll talk to David Price about this too. He's coming up later with the SSAC. There is a fear here that with public schools and the public school system, there's supposed to be equitable distribution of public school funds and for need. If a school needs a turf field, you throw money at that, that's fine. And everyone gets judged on what they might need. But there's also a private booster element to this as well, where you might have some communities that have deep pockets. And when, someone writes you a blank check and says, upgrade your weight room, now all of a sudden you have the facilities in place that can attract these kids. And is that creating an unfair balance?
Well, certainly. I can tell you two of the schools that were benefiting in the area, one of them was putting a jumbo screen up on their gymnasium wall and things that other schools didn't have. Another one had a marked floors with the disco ball and everything in their locker rooms with the wooden. It's just over the top things that you would never see. And it's in one sense we created that environment to do that. And in some sense, I don't really blame that program or the boosters, whomever, because they understand this is the game that we've set the rules that are played by now. And so we're encouraging that. So we as a legislature need to say, okay, that's not what we want to see. Right now. This issue is not just a West Virginia issue. This is nationally, we're seeing these kind of issues, but you've also got name and likeness out there some states are dealing with at the high school level. So you combine a high school that's got a big XYZ car dealership that can say, okay, you come over here, you get this contract or advertising contract with the transfer rule. You've really got a mess, as we've seen at the college level.
One of the arguments behind a lot of these bills is freedom of choice, parental choice. They should be able to go where they want, send their kid where they want, without restrictions. Then you start getting into situations where, okay, how much is too much? And I know that there's a new bill that might be making its way through the Senate that would allow travel ball during season. So in other words, if you're on a basketball team, you can be on an AAU travel ball team in the middle of your basketball season.
Well, as I mentioned, I think the transfer rule that we're dealing with now has its roots in travel ball and club ball, and I'm not villainizing that it has its purpose, but they're two different they're two different missions. And like I said, travel ball, like I said, you want to be seen, you want to get your kid, get more skills developed and travel around as it is and go see at different tournaments where maybe scouts are going to be there. Scholastic ball was never supposed to be about that. So do we really want to overlap and mix these two? At least right now, travel ball has 8 months out of the year to do what they do. Is it really necessary to overlap it into the scholastic season?
I think about when I played in high school. If I went to my coach and said, hey, I know we got a big game coming up next week, and I know we're doing 2 days to get ready for that big game, but I've got to go to Cincinnati this weekend to play for my travel ball team, he would have looked at me like, what?
Oh, absolutely. And just think of the situation. It puts the parent in, it puts the coach in, because now he's got to make a decision. He was one of his star athletes is going to not be there for practice or for even a game because he's at a travel tournament, and then comes back, or do you insert him back in the lineup or her? These are situations that really shouldn't be putting our coaches or parents and even the players in.
So what's your confidence that this bill will get some traction and that you can find some sort of compromise to make everyone happy?
If I had to look at it right now, I think it's better than 50% for certain. But up here, it's much easier to kill a bill than it is to get one across the line. And so there's going to be some naysayers as always, and people as we had last year. Let's wait and see even more. But I like our chances. We have much more acceptance in the Senate now, which is where this originated out of. And I think with that, I think we can sell it better here at the House and get it over there, and hopefully they'll pick it up and run with it. So I like our chances better than not.
What's the pushback been? What's the argument from the other side other than just parental choice?
Well, but the biggest thing is comes back to it's a freedom bill and it's parental choice kind of thing. And, there's very good arguments for that. And as you made there earlier, individually, but collectively is where we're looking at this. We see what it's happening in the schools and communities and things. And, do you really want somebody that practiced the summer with friends on one team coming out and scoring touchdowns 2 months later against, and then maybe pushing up a 70-0 score against their friends they were just with 2 months ago? You're pitting now, friends against friends, community against community, and really don't want to have to see that. So even though there's arguments individually, collectively is the problem.
And do you think the travel ball bill going? I know that's a different body. We're talking about a Senate bill from Senator Grady, but do you think that'll have any traction?
It's been introduced. It was last year, and it did make its way over to the House where it died. We'll wait and see. We're still kind of early into the session. These bills may cross paths, and it may be, that they, well, if you don't take ours up, we won't take yours up. And if it gets into that, really, if I had to pick, probably the travel ball bill is more dangerous than the transfer has been. So if I had to choose, it would be a tough one. But I would think, but like I said, NIL's even out there. We haven't had that yet. So you've got these three big things that are happening in sports across America, and we're trying to figure out and navigate how to deal with them in West Virginia. And so these are things we'll have to deal with, and it's tough. So I'm conservative by nature, and I like high school sports as they were the last 100 years.
Right, and you're very close to scholastic sports and what you do outside the legislature as well. And so, you have a lot of connections, a lot of close ties to families and student athletes. What is your overall take been on the feedback that you're getting on the ground when you're at the local Dairy Queen at Sissonville, and parents are talking to you about because let's be honest, when a bill gets passed, you want to let it breathe. You want to say, okay, I don't want to make too many harsh judgments right away. Let's see how this plays out. It's been almost 2 years now. What's the feedback been from parents?
Rick, I've taken the lead on this from the get-go. From the night it passed, I spoke up on the floor, said this is going to be a problem, this is going to be trouble. And so last year, obviously, led the charge to try to get something repealed, and again this year. But I get stopped, as you say, out on the street, at ball games. I've been stopped down at Marshall Stadium. People, hey, thank you for what you're trying to do. Emails from not just my district, but from all over the state. Hey, look, we got to do something about this. It's probably 95-5 in favor of trying to do something. Like I said, I think if you look at the character of the people of the state of West Virginia, they're about community. They're about helping each other, and they're again putting others ahead of yourself. And this is what I think gets to the core of what we are. We're going to teach our young people, or encourage our young people to put others ahead of themselves, or to be about themselves. And I really think, this, if we get it back where it was, you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that's what we want to encourage in our young people.
All right, well, we'll keep our eyes on that bill as it works its way through the House. Delegate Dana Ferrell, thank you for your time, sir.
All right, great to be here.
Yep.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere, because coming up next, we'll talk with WVSSAC Executive Director David Price about his take on all this and some other issues going on, and how the state football championships went back here in Charleston for the first time in 30 years. When Outside the Echo Chamber continues right after this.
you ready to unlock a future filled with remarkable pay, unbeatable benefits, and unparalleled satisfaction? Imagine embarking on a journey that offers you a college-level education without the weight of debt, all while earning a steady income. Look no further than the West Virginia Building and Construction Trades Apprenticeship Programs. Join us, and together, let's build a future that's brighter and stronger. Go to actwv.org to apply today. The West Virginia Building and Construction Trades, where the future is forged.
Welcome back inside the state capitol on this episode of Outside the Echo Chamber as we continue our discussion about scholastic sports in West Virginia. Joining me now is the executive director of the WVSSAC, David Price. David, thank you for your time today, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I just want to talk to you a little bit about the transfer issue and what's going on currently in the legislature. I know from a professional standpoint, the SSAC stance is just tell us what the law is and we'll make sure it's being followed. But you're also a West Virginian. You also have close ties to parents, to students, to schools and communities. So on a personal level, what are your thoughts and what have you taken away from the last couple of years with this new law in place and what it's meant for these schools and for the SSAC?
Well, there have always been transfers in West Virginia. We've always had transfers for athletic reasons, but not to the magnitude, I think, that we've had with the new bill that you've had a one-time transfer and can go anytime, anywhere you want to for that one time. We've had schools that have really suffered from it in a way that a number of students have left, and it left them with a team that may have just had 9th and 10th graders for the majority playing. It left them at a competitive disadvantage. And but at the same time, in the last year and a half, based on surveys that we've conducted with our high schools, we've had a little over 1,000 students transfer for athletic reasons. And we've been able to take a look at it, and it varies from regions. And it looks like it's happening more in regions where parents do not have to relocate for their child to go to another school. Other things that we found out was that sometimes they're not really chasing better coaching, if you will, but they may have a underclassmen-dominated team that where there are fewer seniors and juniors, and they say, well, we're not going to be very good this year. I'll transfer to School B because I think we'll be better, and I'll have a chance to play on a team that may be making the playoffs or state tournament. We've seen that in many cases. And it's had an effect on communities as well, and this is the one that really matters, is the fact that whenever a student transfers in from out of that school district to play, it displaces a student who's been in that district and the family has been there for a while. And we get phone calls about that all the time. And we remind them that, this was legislation. This was not a rule. As a matter of fact, the rule came up prior to my being in a position in front of the Board of Control, and it was voted down overwhelmingly to keep the transfer policy that the SSAC had in place the way it was.
Now, some of the feedback that we've gotten from coaches is that when a team gets gutted, it's not just hard to rebuild, it's almost impossible to rebuild. Have you heard that from some coaches saying that this is going to kill the program?
Absolutely, we have. And we see a high turnover in coaches in those situations. They'll try to do it for a couple of years and see that they're really battling a tough situation, and then they resign and go elsewhere, maybe as a head coach or assistant coach. So there's a big turnover in those schools as well with coaching, but we have heard that as well.
And another impact here is from the economic side of it. Is this creating a world of haves and have-nots? Because obviously, when you're dealing with public schools, the hope is that funding is equitable, that they find where there's a need and they'll give a new turf field to this school or whatever. But there's also the element of private donors and boosters that can basically write a blank check and say, build a new world-class weight room. And so there's some schools and areas that maybe have those kind of deep pocket boosters that now have the facilities in place that can lure these kids.
And we've definitely seen that as well. And I think that is a factor. And, and recruiting is always a big concern that we have because it goes on. Not only, I think most coaches aren't really directly involved with recruiting, but players from their programs are, boosters, parents of the players.
And you can't police people just out in the local grocery store talking.
And what we find out a lot of times and what we've heard is a lot of these athletes participate when they're summer leagues or travel ball together, and then they want to come back and they play high school, so there's a transfer or two here, and they continue, and they form a, quote, all-star team, if you will.
Sure.
So we have seen that in several cases. So
Now you brought up travel ball. There's a bill going through right now that's in committee, I believe, from Senator Amy Grady that would allow high school students to play travel ball during their seasons. Is there a stance that you've taken on that?
Well, I think we've made our concerns public, and I think we've let her know as well in that. And
you're not in favor of it?
Well, no, I wouldn't be, because I think a couple of things. I think number one is it's teaching our student athletes the wrong thing. I think, once you make a commitment to something, you make a commitment.
Yeah.
And if I've made a commitment to my school team, I should fulfill that commitment.
You can't say, hey, I got to go play in Cincinnati this weekend.
So what's going to happen when I have to make that decision that I'm going to go play in a tournament rather than be at practice or play for my school team and let my teammates down, and what do? But, as far as us, monitoring that and having a rule against that, right now we do. But, if legislation changes that, it changes it. But I think that coaches should have a say in that commitment as well. And if I have a student athlete that leaves our team hanging to go play for somebody else, then I'm going to play the kids who are committed to us as a coach, and I'm going to make that decision.
And that's a big element of high school sports too. You're not just teaching these kids how to play. You're teaching these kids how to grow into young men and women, and discipline and structure and scheduling and following through. That's all part of it.
Well, how does that transition over into the work world, if you will? If somebody is having two jobs, or they, I can't be there today because I have to go work for somebody else today. What does that employer think? So I think those are the lessons and life lessons that come from this, and I think it does transition over. I don't think there's any doubt that it does.
Let's dispel some myths, because I've heard from parents that are saying, like, well, this isn't fair. The law as it is right now is you have a one-time transfer for whatever reason. But there are parents that are saying, well, we have kids that are playing football at Nitro and basketball at St. Albans and baseball at Hurricane. That's not happening.
That's not happening to that extent, but we have had student athletes who have played a sport at a high school and then transferred at the end of that season to play another sport at another high school.
Right.
And they get their one-time transfer no matter what. Now, if they have started, let's use football for example, if they started football practice at school A and then they transfer and want to play football at school B, they're ineligible to play in that sport that they've started practicing until that's over. Now, they could run cross country or play another sport if that's their only one-time transfer. So, but that has happened at that level.
There are some talks about a bill getting run this year that would be more of a compromise bill. Last year there was a full repeal bill that had some momentum for a while and ended up getting killed. That would basically tweak the language of the current bill as it's in place. Do you believe that there is room for improvement? Do you believe that there are some changes that could be made maybe to the language of the bill or to some of the rules that could make everybody happy here?
One of the things that I've learned through my years of experience in education is the fact that sometimes rules, policies, procedures don't always work out the way they're intended. And I think we're wrong if we don't recognize that and come back and amend it. Sometimes you've got to just throw it out, and sometimes you just have to amend it. I think there are ways to amend it because I know one of the concerns is it's a school choice thing. Yeah. So I think there are ways to amend it so that it doesn't affect teams and schools and like it has, and provide that opportunity to for that one-time transfer as well. And we've had some discussion around that, but we haven't had it recently, and I look forward to those conversations because other states do some different things with that as well.
Yeah, now a couple of years in, a bigger sample size, so you learn from your mistakes and hopefully you can move forward. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit because a couple months ago, for the first time in 30 years, we had the Super Six in Charleston, West Virginia. What's the feedback been like on that event? And from I know there are a lot of people that get involved in this, so it's not just the SSAC. But from your perspective, how did it go and what have you learned from it?
Well, first of all, let me say that we don't call it the Super Six anymore.
Right, sure.
It's
8 now.
Well, it's the West Virginia Football State Championships. I know it's a habit. We do the same thing.
I still call it the LA San Diego Chargers.
San Diego Chargers, I understand. But, it was a successful event. Great weather. Let's always start with that. When you're an outdoor sport, weather's a factor.
Sure.
We had really good weather for the state championships. Great turnouts. When we looked at it, our attendance was higher than it's been. And everybody says, well, you had 4 classes. Well, you take the 4th class out, look at the 3 classes. Our attendance was higher than what it's been for many, many years, and you throw the fourth class in, and it added a couple thousand to that. So, and we had a lot of compliments about it. There were some hiccups and things that people wouldn't see behind the scenes that we know that we want to make better next year, and the committee here in Charleston recognized that, and they're the ones who actually brought it to us. So we're looking forward to this continuing to grow. It was a great success.
Is there any one thing that stuck out there, like, okay, we need to do this a little bit better next year?
Well, I think that when they worked out some of the bugs about just as buses arrive and teams arrive, where they drop them off, little things.
Infrastructure stuff.
Yeah, little things that the fans wouldn't see, but we recognize when it comes to logistics.
People with attention to detail
that's
notice
right.
it.
That's exactly right.
And the improvements to Lately helped out, I'm sure, the big Jumbotron.
What Kanawha County Schools did with Lately Field and the city of Charleston was amazing, with the Jumbotron, the press box renovations, locker room renovations were just unbelievable, concession stands, what they did to the bleachers, repairs there and everything. It's really an amazing facility now.
And have you heard from any of the players? Because I know for a lot of these kids, especially from the outlying areas, this is a big deal for them to come to an event like this, and it almost was treated like a bowl game atmosphere. And so they have all these events that they go to leading up to the game. They walk into the locker room to all this fanfare. I mean, it was something that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. What have they told you about it?
The one thing I've learned is that, the response has been positive, but the one thing I've learned in my year and a half in this position and being around executive directors from other states, West Virginia does it well. We really do it well and build it up, and they're amazed at some of the things that we're doing and how we can treat our athletes. I'll give you an example of some of that was the state basketball tournament last year. We had some interns that were helping us with it, and they were foreign exchange students that were in college, and they came back to us and said, we wish that our countries treated high school sports like you do here. We don't get that in our countries. If you can't pay to travel, you don't participate. It's more like intramurals. We don't have this experience. We wish we had it. So I thought it was funny that our country seems to be trending more toward what they have.
Yeah.
They want to trend more like we have. So you don't know what you don't know until you listen. And I found that. But I think that our experiences with our high school athletes and what they get to experience is very unique. And we want to continue to help it grow.
When you mentioned spotlighting high school sports, I can throw in a shameless plug now, because we at HD Media Plus, make sure you download that app. We're streaming all kinds of sports this year: soccer, football, basketball, baseball. Right. So we bring high school sports to your living room for free. So download the HD Media Plus app right now. And if you're listening to this, remember, if you're watching this, you can listen to it on Spotify or Apple, your podcast, and drop us a like or a subscription while you're there, so we can keep shows like this going. You talked a little bit about basketball. Right now, the girls are in their state tournament at the Coliseum. Reclassification has been an issue over the last year or so. How's that gone so far, and what's your feedback been on that?
Well, again, I'll go to the state tournament part first. We start wrestling this evening. Yeah. Weigh-ins are at 4:30 in Huntington. That's where I'll be going when I leave here. Then we turn around Sunday and have our meeting for our state girls basketball tournament, which starts on Tuesday. Quad A, Single A, and Double A have already finished their regions. Triple A will finish tonight. Those seeds will be out, and we'll have the whole tournament set. Following week's boys. So boys will be in their regions next week.
Back to back.
So we're on the move for the next 3 weeks. Reclassification, as you know, that has been a challenge for us this year. So we have some proposals that will be coming up before the Board of Control that they'll be considering in April, and we'll be working through that. So
one of those changes is happening as we speak right now. The getting rid of sectionals and just going to a straight kind of co-regional. How's that been so far?
That's been talked about for many years, and finally the Board of Directors and the coaches committees recommended it. It wasn't just the Board of Directors who did it. We have coaches committees in each sport. They're represented from all the regions, all the classifications, and they've been wanting to do this for a while now. So we moved to the regional format, and it's worked well thus far. Now, we know there's some bugs. It's the first year we've done it. We know there's some hiccups that we'll have to work through and talk about and how to improve, but right now it's been very successful.
And when we get back into the football season in the fall, last year, of course, with the reclassification, you had a situation where every team in Quad A made the playoffs because you only had 16 teams. Right. Has that been a discussion about maybe ways to tweak that or maybe work the numbers a little bit differently?
Well, we'll see how the reclassification proposals come out and what that does to Quad A, Triple A, Double A, and Single A again. But, for that matter, there are states that when they start football playoffs, all teams are in. It doesn't matter if you're 0-10, 10-0, you're in, just like what we do for every other sport where we have regional play. Every team makes the tournament,
Right.
and they're eliminated as the process. Football's different in West Virginia. Have a great rating system that's been here for decades, and it works well, and it gets the best 16 teams in the field, we believe. And, I think there's evidence of that through who makes it to the state championships and how it all plays out. We know that for 16 teams in Quad A, it will take a lot of work and be very challenging to be able to have regional play in the other sports other than just football. If you would maintain that in football as 16 teams, I think the discussion would have to be, are we going to have a 16-team playoff in Quad A?
Right.
Or whether that would be reduced. I think those discussions would have to be had as we move forward. But we'll see how all of this reclassification plays out at the Board of Control and what they determine they want us to do, and we'll move forward with it.
You mentioned the rating system caused a little bit of an issue at the start of the playoff season last year for football because some of the teams were saying that they weren't clear on which system you would be using, the old one or the new one with the bonus points involved. Did you learn anything from that in terms of when you make these types of changes to be very clear right up front, or is it your position that we were very clear, they just weren't listening to what we were saying?
Well, I think we were very clear, and everyone knows that rule, and it's always been in play that no matter what classification you're assigned to, that's what the rating points are, and that's always been. And I think that the timing of those changes by the review board of what we had to do and what we had to adjust. It wasn't our decision to do that.
Right.
That was something that was handed
and
to us.
Their position was we had already had our schedule set. There was no way to make adjustments to it.
Well, and then again, that argument, we know schedules for football are made well in advance. Those are made in December usually.
Sure.
And actually contracts and those discussions and negotiations to play or even start earlier than that for upcoming years. So to change that schedule, it wouldn't have changed at that time anyway, and we know that. But at the same time, it did affect some schools of the review board's decision to move those schools. At the time, we had to move them at the beginning of the year. But they knew that and worked through the entire season of those points in the classification and filed the injunction at the end. And it didn't change the fact that they were in the playoffs. It changed where they were seated, and they thought it changed where they were seated. But once they flipped it back, they found out, well, it didn't change us but one position, so it didn't really matter. It didn't really factor that much. So, but it does have a factor.
Sure. And we got some good games in the championship that weekend. At the end of the day, you got to beat good teams to get there anyway. So
to be the best, you got to beat the best.
All right. Well, we thank you for your time, David. Always a pleasure talking to you, and I know that you'll be looking forward to what happens here under the Gold Dome over the next couple
Rick,
months.
It's always a pleasure, and it's always nice to get to talk to you. And yes, we'll be paying attention to what happens here.
All right. And tell the Archer family we said hi when you get out to Huntington for the wrestling tournament.
We will definitely do that. Thank you.
David Price from the WVSSAC, and we'll be right back with more Outside the Echo Chamber right after this.
CJU is a great company to work for. We've been around for 78 years. We are an underground utility construction company all across the East Coast. We are rapidly growing, and we're seeing a huge growth in this market, a huge need for employees. We are always looking for those that are experienced, those that are trying to get their foot in the door. We have positions for everybody. We offer competitive pay. We offer competitive benefits. We take pride in having a family atmosphere at CJU's, and it's truly just a family company.
Welcome back inside the state capitol on this episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. That's going to do it for this show, but we want to thank our guests today, WVSSAC Executive Director David Price and Delegate Dana Ferrell, to get their thoughts on the transfer bill currently making its way through the legislature. And we'll be back next week on Tuesday as we continue to talk about issues and concerns that are important to you and your family. Until then, I'm Rick Lord. Take care.